Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for It's the Data, a new approach to IT service excellence. My name is Raleigh Gould, and I will be the moderator for today's event. Our featured speakers are Dennis Drogseth, VP of Research at Enterprise Management Associates, Charlie Betts, Research Director at Enterprise Management Associates, Bernie Memon, a Blazent client at a Fortune 500 financial firm, and Adam Clark, Director of Systems Engineering at Blazent. Dennis brings over 30 years of experience in various aspects of marketing and business planning for service management solutions. He supports CMA through leadership in business service management, CMDB systems, automation systems, and service-centric financial optimization. Charlie has 19 years of IT experience. At EMA, his focus is on IT portfolio management, IT financial management, software asset management, service desks, and ITSM suites, as well as the concept of ERP for IT. And before I hand things over to our featured speakers, I did want today's audience to know that we will be concluding today's event with a Q&A session. But feel free to answer or log your questions at any time throughout the course of the presentation by using the Q&A functionality located in the right-hand column of your screen. You'll also be receiving an email later this week, which will include an on-demand playback of today's webinar, as well as a PDF of the speaker slides. So be on the lookout for that email. And now I would like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Charlie Betts. Charlie?
Great, thank you, Raleigh, and thanks to Blazent and for the opportunity to talk about this most important subject of data quality and its relationship to IT service management. We're going to talk about the ways that you can gain value from focusing on data quality in your IT management tooling, and the challenges that we see sometimes with a CMDB-only approach, and we're going to hear some great stories from Blazent and their client from the real world as to how a focus on data quality has benefited IT practitioners in the trenches. To start off, I'd like to repeat something I've said previously. Ignore data quality and watch your CMDB die, or your asset repository, or your IT service management suite, or your ITIL initiative, or your COBIT initiative. At the end of the day, you have to have quality data in order to have quality processes. And of course, quality processes then lead to delivery excellence and performance excellence. But we often forget about the importance of data quality, and data quality is itself a notable and well-established field of study and professional practice. There are great practitioners and authors and consultants who have spent large parts of their careers focusing on data quality, not necessarily in IT, but in areas like customer and product data management, which also have huge data quality issues. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned there, and it's very exciting to see some of these lessons getting applied to the business of IT. Of course, in the supply chain business, one might deal with customers and what the products that they're ordering and the supplies that it takes to create those products, and the suppliers and the sourcing arrangements and the logistics of transporting those supplies to the factories and distribution centers, and all of that requires tons of data. Companies like Federal Express and UPS, very, very data driven. But as we see the large IT organizations, as they start to get into managing budgets in the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, and servers, in the thousands and tens and thousands and hundreds of thousands of servers, and the thousands of people supporting them, and the budgetary and account codes, and the thousands of applications, networking switches, storage, facilities, all of this is the data that is needed for the business of IT and its key processes like project release, change, request, incident, and problem management. The set of processes, kind of the core 6 processes that we often hear discussed as we talk about IT management and what it takes to do it correctly, and what the key areas areas of concern are. Any one of these processes might be dependent on quality. The change process is certainly dependent on quality data about applications and what servers they're running on. The project process is dependent on quality budgetary information and so on and so forth. And all of these processes, when they don't have good data quality, they may diminish enterprise value. And here is a diagram. As always, these webinars are recorded, and I encourage you to come back and just look at this diagram. If you want to, you can pause the webinar and look at these more complex diagrams. But as we see, accuracy means that trusted data is going to be reused instead of being recreated, and that saves money and adds value. If you have an accurate CMDB, you may execute your changes better, have fewer outages. That means that IT has better uptime. That's also valuable. It also means that if you have an incident, you may be able to resolve the incident more quickly, and then you have improved SLA adherence, and that adds enterprise value. So at the end of the day, a lot of these value propositions are dependent on quality data. And of course, somebody may say it's also quality process, but in my view, quality process and quality data are not opposed in any way. They are two sides of the same coin of performance excellence. So let's look at some examples. I mean, for example, this is not a mythical case. I unfortunately have seen this kind of a thing, although I'm glad to say I wasn't the one who signed off on this change order. The old server was running. Nobody knows what it's for. And many IT professionals on the phone may be smiling and saying, yeah, boy, I've had that temptation. Well, I've seen people give into that temptation, and then there was a small but profitable business unit that had a week-long outage. It had real business impact. The issue is that the change process did not have accurate data, and I think, if we can all talk frankly, Joan Rivers, can we talk? As IT professionals, 5 or 10 years ago, it might be possible to say, well, that's just the way it is, and we don't know what runs on what, and IT is getting too important. You can't not know what's running on an asset that, maybe costs $25,000 to acquire and even now has, consumed that depreciation plus ongoing maintenance time. To simply say, well, we don't know what this is for, how would that be perceived if you were on a factory floor? It would just not be acceptable for any other part of the business, and it's no longer acceptable in IT. And guess what? It's not rocket science to solve. It just takes commitment. Same thing with release process. You've got new functionality you're going to roll out. Well, you better know where it's going to go. And if you've just added capacity, have you closed the loop with that new capacity? Is it understood now to be available, and that's now part of the new release and deployment process, that the code drop needs to now include these two servers? Well, if you forget that, you've got release. Perhaps the release has to be rolled back. Perhaps marketing windows get missed. I mean, these are all real-world examples we've heard, and have to keep, take the names are changed to protect the guilty. But this is another example of how the quality data is so important. And of course, this last one applies regardless of whether you're an internal IT organization or you're an MSP. I mean, if your customer doesn't believe your billings are based, on schedules of what it is we did for you, and there's thousands of lines in the schedule, one for each server. And of course, what a prudent CFO or financial professional is going to do is, they're going to do some spot checking. They're going to see if the totals balance. They're going to look at your accounts versus their accounts. And if they can't get this stuff to add up, guess what? You may not get that check. You may not get that check in the mail because they're just not signing off on your billing. And guess what? They'd already retired those assets. But the chargeback is not being accepted because you didn't have good controls. They were on top of it that they retired it because they knew they'd be paying less money, so maybe they were a little bit more motivated. But at the end of the day, it results in a dispute, and that's not good for either party. And of course, it applies whether you're talking about an internal IT organization that just has some chargeback and cost recovery, as well as managed service providers where it's even more formal and even more high profile and may lead to the holding back of a real negotiable check that you now can't deposit. So one of the things I want to just touch briefly on is that I mentioned at the beginning that data management is a well-established set of practices and disciplines that it goes far beyond IT. I mean, you see data management with large customer data warehouses, supply chain data warehouses. Any companies, and most companies nowadays, are becoming more and more data-centric. And what you see in general is the establishment of a data services layer. Now, I am showing a data services layer for the business of IT. But you could see this upper green box. I mean, this is what it looks like if you're dealing with petabytes of customer information. You need to figure out how you're going to transform and load and transform that data. Again, it's deliberately transform and then load and transform, because that's often how it happens. You need to identify your master data sources. You have to reconcile to those master data sources. You need some ability to assess the quality of the data as it's coming through this pipeline and services layer. You need to be able to extract the data from source systems. You need to keep audit trails of those extracts, non-trivial capacity problems. And then you have an analytics layer that is enabled by these lower level services, because if you can't trust the quality of the data that's coming into the pipeline, you certainly can't trust the analytics that are being output by the data warehouse and any subsequent or subsidiary data marts. Which again, those analytics then in today's business, to close the loop and then go back down into the source systems and govern those source systems, set objectives for those source systems, and so on. And this is your classic closed loop BI data warehousing model, shown in an IT context where you see things like IT demand and portfolio management, systems management, and the ITSM core, which would include asset management, application lifecycle management, supply chain management, and governance and IT continuous improvement, all important sources of IT data that increasingly in mature organizations are being seen as part of an overall IT data architecture, and not just a bunch of random standalone silos. So I think if there's one takeaway I would urge you all to derive from this slide, it's that you need a data architecture for the business of IT just as much as you need it for the business of banking, or the business of insurance, or the business of healthcare, or the business of transportation. So, and as a data services layer, bit of a comical picture here. That little smart car, of course, is not actually pulling that huge trailer. But speaking as somebody who's worked with CMDBs, they're great tools. I advocate for CMDBs. But as a full-fledged data services layer, they still are lacking some things, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So, for example, one of the common CMDB failures as a data services layer is that as you're bringing data together, the CMDB is often set up to simply say, well, we're going to have a very rigid set of rules as to what data we want to keep and what data we're going to throw out, and the data that gets rejected is just gone. It just goes into the bit bucket. But, that's a continuous improvement opportunity there. Why was the data wrong? Are you tracking that? Are you doing some root cause analysis? So more sophisticated data management architectures are helpful if you really want to start to understand why you're seeing inconsistencies and why one source is saying one thing and the other source is saying the other thing. Similarly, if you're understanding that you are concerned about the fact that these two sources are never completely in sync, well, if you're coming at it from a Lean Six Sigma point of view, a continuous improvement, TQM point of view, one of the most important things you have to do is track the trending. And I've not seen too many CMDBs that are very good at this, looking over time and saying, okay, well, we've been reconciling these two systems and we've been putting some countermeasures in place so that they no longer seem to be so out of sync, because it's ultimately not great to be solving the problems after the fact through reconciling two systems and flushing out inaccuracies that way. You want to understand it on the front end so that you don't have inaccuracies going in. So you want to track the trending so you can show people how your data quality is improving over time, which is also a very important aspect to building trust in the CMDB or the asset repository or the enterprise architecture repository or whatever repository it is that you're trying to get people to believe in and to subscribe to. So finally, then the final failure is that these rules are not simple. They are not trivial rules. For example, the rules around reconciling something as simple, quote unquote simple, as a server. Well, you've got the serial number. But wait a second, are we talking about the serial number on the invoice, or the serial number on the plate, or the serial number that's in the BIOS? And any of them can be different. You know, there's all kinds of failure cases there. You've got the issues, you know, the endless issues with virtualization and the relationship between, you know, the DNS, and, you know, people say, well, we're just going to look at the network. The trouble is that, you know, if you've got, you know, multiple IPs, it's really very hard from a data management perspective. And guess what? It's hard, and yet it's the same in any industry vertical. So it's hard, but it's also a problem where somebody can say, I'm going to really get good at this problem, and that's what our friends at Blazent have done very much, is really sort this stuff out so you don't have to. Because do you really want to be paying a high-end data analyst? And that's what it takes. And I'm speaking from experience. You know, we've solved this. I've seen this problem solved in the field, and it took the skills of one of our more highly compensated data analysts and SQL experts who was working on this for months at a time when he could have been working on things much more appropriate to the financial services organization. So the question is, you know, where do you want to spend your precious IT high-skilled staff time? Do you want to spend it solving this problem, which probably they can with enough effort, but then you have to maintain that solution? Or would you rather have your people work on things more strategic to your value chain, and let somebody else solve this problem for multiple industry verticals, because it really is the same problem. A Dell server or HP server in a data center, you know, kind of the same set of problems, whether you're in healthcare or transportation. So I think with that somewhat admittedly whirlwind tour through the need for data quality and some of the limitations of the CMDB, I am now going to hand this over to my very good friend and colleague, Dennis Strogsuth, to talk a little bit more about some of the failures and opportunities he's seen from his perspective. Dennis?
Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, I'm going to be looking at missing and incorrect data in the incident environment, incident management, where operations and service desk and CMDB and federated sources and data, love of tool set, and siloed sense of job security all come together. There's a very human side to data, right? And especially when you get into monitoring and tools and who owns what and who's right and what's a trusted source. And irreconciled sources can create all kinds of issues. So here's a case where there's sort of a floating malaise. I won't go so far. It may have been existential, but I'm not so sure it was an encouraging Camus sense existential. Just a lot of pain that was non-specific. The person who ended up complaining was heads of line of business when production wasn't really getting, business wasn't doing what it needed to do. So large financial organization. They had a whole bunch of tool sets from IBM, HP, NetIQ, SolarWinds, and Eternity, among others, trying to bring this all together and understand what was wrong. And in this case, the speaker is a project in network and services monitoring. The point here being irreconciled data, whether it's from more traditional CMDB-related integrations in terms of asset management, or perhaps less traditional, more on the performance and incident management front, create a lot of pain. And in fact, again, there's a lot of political and human investment in what those sources are and how they should be used. Here's a case where sort of implied step forward. Wanting to get better metrics for continuous service improvement, to establish better running services and applications. This was, in fact, a large independent managed network and security and cloud services provider. They were working to develop a dialogue, and I would argue again that dialogue is a very important part of data, because data comes from people, and people need to talk sometimes, not always a virtue in IT in terms of communication skills. And they were trying to build a bridge between development and operations in this case. Here we have a very large managed services provider, and all of these headquartered in North America, by the way, and also trying to build as you can see, a bridge between operations and development, two communities that are not traditionally united necessarily. And I think their environment was to support many different size organizations with managed data centers, some of which were large global clients and some of which were quite small. And so there's another dimension to data in today's environment, which is ecosystem, an environment of consistent vision across not only an IT organization and the business it supports, but a whole set of partners, suppliers, and service providers coming in together, all of whom constitute interdependencies in terms of a managed service. I call that idle version 7, waiting for that one to happen. So here are some pretty straightforward quotes, all specific to CMDB management. And of course, there's no end to the list of dialogues you can have about complaints regarding CMDB deployments, although I will say I'm seeing some good signs of life and things getting better. Talking about CI collisions here, just a struggle for getting better, tighter tools for data import, something I think you'll hear a little more about from Blazent. Data entry isn't always that easy. Couldn't that be made easier? How do we just streamline that process? So bumpy that people want to pull the plug at times. I suspect a few of you out there have experienced something along those lines. And nonetheless, they persisted in this case. Yeah, I've rarely heard somebody tell me that they wish the processes around CMDB deployments and management would be more complicated than they are. They usually would like them to be simpler, more focused, and more efficient. And of course, this is not only just for a personal grudge, but it really affects the efficiency of the business and the operation. One of the quotes I didn't present here along these lines, but definitely regarding some of these issues, someone said, "There are no perfect products, only perfect salesmen." Now looking at some of the benefits, and once again, the very political and human nature of data, when you have those struggles, can come together in some very valuable ways once you see the efficiencies gained in bringing consistent and reconciled vision of truth. Here's a small group, 300-person IT shop, but continual growth and interest, and that's another thing, of course, about CMDBs. That's done in phased implementations. This is a foods manufacturer. Right now, they're able to manage this environment with about 1/2 of one full-time employee. This goes back to, believe it or not, the folks that were dealing with that existential malaise in the first quote. Turned out to be configuration issues in the endpoint. And it took a lot of data mining, in a sense, to bring to the fore what the problem was. But once that was done, it solved the problem, and the lines of business executives were happy. Here's a pretty dramatic story, really involving data center optimization and consolidation, having a consistent and accurate vision of what's there and what needs to be changed, going from making significant changes, taking a week or more to 5 minutes, the CMDB. The environment had about 6,000 servers, and they had 1,200 applications, not all of which were, needless to say, are represented in the CMDB. So I'll add one little quote here that sort of maybe belongs in the second chart, something to keep in mind as you go forward. They had managed to reduce incidents dramatically, but a lot of the folks who were not involved with the initiative tried to take credit for it. And their quote to me was, "Something goes bad, nobody wants to own that problem, they all point to you. When things are improved, you have one of these initiatives, everybody tries to take credit." Charlie, I'm going to turn it back to you to wrap up.
Off mute. Thanks, Dennis. I just was coming off mute. So as we've heard now, I think as I've stated, and as we've heard from Dennis, I think it's, again, the takeaways would be that quality services need quality processes, and quality processes need quality data. And this is just as true in IT as it is in the broader world of marketing and customer relationship management and sales and logistics and operations and the plant floor, as well as all the verticals. I do believe that we are seeing great industry progress inspired by the big data movement towards more robust data services layers. I think that there is a lot of innovation happening there. But at the end of the day, you can't get past data quality. You have to apply a continuous improvement approach so that you can track your data quality over time. You can show how it is gradually improving. This is how you inspire confidence in any shared data store, whether it be a CMDB or a customer database. And we're going to now turn to Blazent and their client, Bernie, to talk a little bit about solutions and some more real-world experiences in this very important area.
Thanks, Charlie. So my name is Bernie Mammon. I've been a Blazent client for, I'm going to say, 7+ years. I've worked with Blazent in the manufacturing environment and the overall financial industry. I'm currently involved in another one of our major implementations or installations of the Blazent capability. And what I'd like to do is kind of walk you through the benefits we've obtained, we have seen, why we've chose to use Blazent capabilities, and give you some more insight to the success we've had. So as I work in the industry over the years here, specifically over the last 5 to 7 years, I typically get challenged with business objectives and also get challenged with operational objectives. From a business perspective, a lot of times the executives talk about, number one, how do you get the IT and the business alignment? 2, we need cost savings. 3, we got to manage change and manage transformation type of activities. From an operations perspective, typically it always comes down to, we got to address and focus on quality, risk, resilience, and look at an overall competitive advantage, and which basically translates a lot to being able to reduce your overall cost and being able to be more competitive in the market with your offerings. What I've done here is kind of listed true experiences we've had from a business perspective, where we've actually obtained cost containment, cost reductions, additional billings, cost avoidance, and reduction in a lot of penalties that we were paying, and numerous operational improvements. And what I'd like to do is give you some factual statements or data. Part of one of the implementations, we were able to recoup 15% additional billings in about 9 to 12 months. We were able to increase our asset management completeness and accuracy by over 30% in 6 months. Over a 3-year period, we were able to focus on a couple business key measurements related to the environment, either from a lost unit perspective, where we were able to reduce the number of incidents and downtime by 60%, or if you looked at it from lost engineering, productivity, or capabilities, because of unavailability or incidents, we were able to actually increase the overall productivity in that environment 90% by using the intelligence of the data and actually focusing on the overall footprint of the operations. We've been able to reduce our asset cost over 5% within the first 6 months. We've used the Blazent capabilities on several occasions as the first step within, like the first 45 to 60 days of putting together stabilization plans, or when you're going into an environment to look at opportunities for improvement. You go in there, and we've been using a lot of the Blazent capabilities to do a lot of the correlation of the data and to establish key foundational information to be able to make our right business decisions and lay out our plan. We've been able to, from more of an operational side, I'll just give you a couple key examples. Identification of a lot of the servers and how they're mapped to the backup central control server, and which ones were not getting backed up, didn't even have the backup software on it, and significantly reduced our risk and ensured our overall continuity. Same thing from an antivirus or security perspective. Looking at the, matching up the data from our licenses to our actual servers to our actual centralized antivirus server, and doing a correlation of data there and understanding which servers do not have the right type of software capabilities on it and get them installed to limit the risk in that to the environment. One of the other things that's really helped us with over the years is, we always get a challenge in a lot of the agreements we sign, either as an outsourced environment I was in or in an in-sourced environment where you have to meet overall SLAs. If the client or the environment you have to deliver to wants to go up to 4 nines or 5 nines, and you're looking at the gap of what it takes, focusing on what I call overall quality debt, if it's from a process, people, technology, basically looking at the correlation of all the data to be able to, improve and move forward to meet those overall service levels and capabilities. And in a lot of the contracts, we've had to do that in 6 months. You typically get +3 or +6 months from the contract to actually be able to improve to the expected service levels before starting to pay penalties. And we've used this capability a lot in the correlation of the data to make the right business decisions. There's also a lot of intangible, well, I guess you could say they're tangible. It depends on how you look at it. But one of the major intangible activities that continuously has been experienced is just pure productivity. The ability to free up your associates and to free up your overall extended supply chain or value chain to focus on, more future type activities and things that can really give you a competitive advantage versus, just focusing on trying to keep the environment under control. If I go to the next slide, how we've leveraged the capabilities, we've used it for what I'm going to call an overall, executive dashboard. We've used where Blazent data correlation and the capabilities has actually helped prepare relate business data to financial data to operational data. It's also allowed us to capture specific metrics and relationships, and we actually present it to our overall executive dashboards through the portal. We use it, like I mentioned, on the business and technical correlation. In a lot of areas, we actually use it to establish the CMDB the first time, because in a lot of areas it is difficult to capture data from multiple sources. The thing about the Blazent capabilities, and in a lot of the environments I've gone into and had to operate in, is you don't have one tool. With the capabilities here, you don't need everyone on the same tool. You just need to look at the same process and then basically let the Blazent capabilities do the correlation of the data to help you get, your single source of truth, or to create a gold record, or to, your starting record that you further expand upon. The other thing is, in the world I've operated, you never have a complete CMDB. The CMDB is ever growing. There's always additional relationships. There's always additional complexity that's in the environment, not only your direct installations, but your shared service installations. And you need a lot of the capability of Blazent to do some of your federated, what I call ad hoc reporting or ad hoc scenarios that could help you with incident, problem, change, or release type activities. We continuously use the capability to look, like I mentioned earlier, on your risk, primarily from an audit perspective. You're able to self-govern yourself and do self-audits on a regular basis, looking at missing agents, missing components, where you have version issues. We have integrated into the overall idle capabilities. One of the major areas that's also helped is where we would be managing what I would call a multi-vendor delivery structure or a multi-vendor supply chain structure, where if you're in like an enterprise, outsourcing environment with multiple vendors, it helps you really pull the billing across them together, look at the the end-to-end cost of the services, which helps you internally with your cost base, service cost base, and how you look at your allocations and your being able to do your benchmarking. but it also allows you to do the measurement and monitoring and performance across multiple vendors to see how it's actually, services are being provided. When you're working with the value chain and the suppliers are actually providing the services as a part of your extension, you're able to correlate their asset data to your assets, and then eventually to your CMDB configurations. You look at their billings, but you're also able to track overall implementation statuses by looking at different types of versioning that's going on a daily basis of the different software components and how much complete you are, and as far as our upgrades and conversions that are happening. We've been able to identify and relate this specifically to increase in our overall service availability and remediate a lot of things that I call technical debt or quality debt. Now, what's good about the overall Blazent activity and why we've been using Blazent in multiple areas is, you really need the intelligence of data to make your business decisions. You really need to make, you need to have facts versus perceptions. And you're able to do multiple correlations of information and data here from multiple sources that really allow you to make those right decisions. The other thing is, in the operational world, you rely a lot on service management tools and other individual COT tools. A lot of them provide specific information, specific data. The service management tools have, if you're thinking of ServiceNow or Remedy or Service Manager in them, they have limited correlation engines, and it's primarily just how they want to look at data for their environment. And using Blazent, it allows you to do a lot more correlation engines, not only to feed those environments, but to use the data in other aspects to ensure that what you're getting from multiple sources, you could get into solid records that you could actually import into these environments and manage through the workflows and the work groups. You're able to walk into environments and do proof of concepts in a very short period of time. You're able to walk in and actually stand up an implementation in 45 to 60 days and start seeing value over a short period of time. And it really gives you the end-to-end view of the overall IT and the operations as you go forward. It helps you really eliminate your data processing expense and maintenance and manage your overall contracts with your vendors to ensure you can renegotiate your contracts right. And the biggest thing is you're increasing your overall quality and you're reducing your expense and you have data to make decisions. The value I've really seen is we've been able to continuously reinvest ourselves to take us to the next level to make sure we're always trying to have that competitive advantage. What is the value of Blazent and how is Blazent unique? From my perspective, it's the opportunities, how you get overall service excellence, its ability to provide key data points for service management capabilities, allowing you to do operation integration and business integration. The biggest thing is it really allows you to come in and establish a foundation of your assets, of your CMDB, and your overall service delivery capabilities of what's actually happening. It allows you to accelerate on a lot of key initiatives which happen to be standard across a lot of the operations group. If it's things like monitoring, your configuration management, if you're doing data center consolidations, if you're doing mergers, acquisitions, if you're trying to increase your overall maturity of idle, it gives you the right type of data and the right information to integrate into all those main core processes. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of individual correlation engines, but none of them really give you the capability of mapping business data, financial data to operational type of data to give you an overall perspective from an IT business alignment. Adam, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Bernie. Appreciate it. So what I thought we'd do for the next 10 minutes, and I want to leave some time at the end because I have seen some questions for Bernie and others, is just give you an overview. So I'm Senior Director of Technical Sales and Customer Success here at Blazent, And for those that aren't familiar, I'll go through a few slides background and then get into the how. So we've talked a lot about the need for data quality and what the impact can be if you can address it. So now I want to get into how we actually do it. So Blazent's been around since 2001, and really the specific mission is to give IT executives the necessary information they need to make confident data-driven decisions really around transforming IT. So we talked a lot about service management in particular. Bernie went into examples in the asset management and operations space. We also do the same thing for software management. And the key has been to make those decisions and to do the transformation, you need the information to do that, and you need trusted data to do that. And typically it's been incomplete, it's been siloed, and people just don't know what they don't know. And so what we do is we take all these different systems, and not only do we correlate them across the different systems, but we also audit them for accuracy. So you can be sure that whether it's data that you're using to feed into your CMDB or information from all these disparate tools that you're using to make decisions, that you can trust that information. And then we do the analytical insight to roll that up in a meaningful way. So let's first address data quality and then roll it and present it in a meaningful way to actually make a decision. Now, we're really proud of our customers and our relationships with our customers. This is just a sampling of them, but they are, in many cases, the leader in their industry across all geographies in the world. And really, from an early on perspective, with our outsourced customers, we've been used to manage more than $50 billion in IT outsource contracts, where it's really important to be able to respond, improve service levels and data quality, and make sure that people are billing accurately for the services they're providing. And then in the enterprise space, we've been used to really reduce, hundreds of millions of dollars associated with operations and cost and efficiencies. And so I won't spend too much time here. I just want to get into how we do it. So at the high level, we are a software as a service, so we're not deploying any new tools into the environment. We're leveraging existing tools that are in place, so existing discovery tools. We're not deploying anything new. We leverage and improve the existing tools around CMDBs and asset management. In some cases, depending on the maturity of the organization, manual spreadsheets. And we're taking both those internal and external data sources, depending on if you're sourcing some of the functions of IT. And we correlate that through our reconciliation engine and governance engine. So we do cleansing and normalization. We have a series of precedence rules that roll that data up, takes the best information from the best sources to produce what we call a golden record. And we incorporate a lot of business logic specific to the different accounts to make the information meaningful. So there's a series of modules that roll up this information as we define and see discrepancies through the reconciliation engine, whether that's around asset and configuration accuracy. We do what we call an electronic book to floor and floor to book, where we're comparing whatever the source of truth is, whether that's a CMDB or asset management system or a spreadsheet, to everything we find in the floor electronically. And we're determining, can you actually find the things in the environment that you think are active? And that's an opportunity for cost reduction if we're finding things that you're paying maintenance and support on that are no longer in the environment. Or vice versa, are there rogue assets, new assets in the environment that weren't properly end-of-lifed or were brought into the environment without the proper change process? And so that's really to roll up those issues. The other thing that we look at is from an operational tool perspective, if you do have tools in the environment that are doing backup and monitoring and patching, et cetera, we take all that information in, look not only in the direction of a CMDB, but we also look back at the source information to see what the true coverage is. If you go to any one of those teams, you'll typically get that you're 98, 99% accurate for that specific tool, but that's only the data they know about. When we correlate all the information, typically we see the percentages are much lower than are expected. We have a specific module focused on data quality, which I'll talk more in. We're putting a lot of product development in that space and how it's going to interact with service management systems going forward. We recently released an updated software inventory module that really focuses on, one, are you properly collecting the information from a software perspective? How do we make sense out of this disparate data through a catalog and cleansing? And how do you really use this information to try and reduce the overall cost or make sure that you don't have multiple versions in the environment. And then the last piece, which Bernie referenced as well, is specific to billing and chargeback, whether that's an external outsourcer or internal shared service environment where you're billing back to the account. And we're validating the accuracy of those charges and that you can prove that you're charging accurately. And so I want to talk briefly about some of the ways that we do this. This is a little bit more detailed example, but what we're looking at in this case is one physical server or virtual server, depending on which source you're looking at, and we'll talk about how we decide that. And these are the number of different sources that we're finding that particular asset in. In this case, there's a CMDB that says this is a deployed server. It's logging in through an Active Directory domain. SCCM is used for software inventory as well as patching. We have a backup, but there's no date from that backup record, and we also have a manual spreadsheet. What we do is we correlate all this information. In some cases, data that can't be directly correlated. In this case, we have a CMDB that has a serial number and an Active Directory that only has a host name. So normally, if you tried to use some sort of spreadsheet kung fu to do this, you couldn't. So we pull all these data sources together. We can indirectly match these to figure out this is all the same device. And then in many cases, there's conflicts that exist, whether it's something as simple as a miskeyed serial number that can create problems to tying back to financial records, or as I mentioned in the beginning, it's something that we've already virtualized that we may still think is a physical server can have licensing implications as well as data center consolidation implications. So we identify those critical conflicts that exist and we roll those up in those modules. And along the way, we're selecting the best data from each one of these sources. And we can do that by selecting it by the most recent scan date. We can do it by a ranking mechanism, a number of mechanisms to determine what the real gold record is. And we apply a lot of business logic in our analytics to make sure that we're not showing you a bunch of exceptions that aren't valid. So whether it's assets that can't be identified on the network because they're in a protected space or they can't support the standard tools, or whether it's billing logic for what's a billable or non-billable device. And then along the way, because all these different systems are entered in a different way and are disparate, we do a fair amount of normalization. This example here on the far right is all the different variations you might get for something as simple as a Microsoft Windows device. We need to normalize that in a way so as we're doing reports or we're getting ready for a Windows 7 migration, we have one consolidated view that's across all those systems so that we can make the decisions. And then the piece that isn't here and can be most important is this is what we know about the server and the environment. There's also things that we don't know. What's missing? This is a server, but there's no antivirus agent even though it's a Windows server. There's no monitoring being done to this server, and that's risk that can lead to outages, longer mean time to restore, et cetera. So that's a little bit of background on what it looks like behind the scene. And the direction we're going is this data that's currently being, in some cases, fed into the CMDB but not checked for accuracy, we really believe that we should be sitting in front of that as more of a data arbiter to take data from these disparate sources, check for conflicting values, missing values, get the data right before it enters in the CMDB, and then have a closed loop so that we can interact, create tickets, track it through the traditional workflow on an ongoing basis so we can really continuously improve the quality of the CMDB, which in the end drives up the user adoption and the value of that system because all those other processes, whether it's release, change, request, incident, rely on that core foundation of the CMDB. And so that's the role we see us to continue to expand into is this data arbiter to make sure that the underlying systems that are being used to fed the CMDB and the CMDB itself are accurate. And along those lines, from a product perspective, we're coming out with a couple new modules here in Q4. The first one is really an extension of our existing data quality module that in a more real-time way gives the power to the end user to be able to configure and really audit the completeness and accuracy of any data source that's imported into Blazent. We have several customers that are currently in beta and providing us feedback that we're going to add as we release it, and it really gives a customer-defined view to these gold records so that you can address some of the quality issues. And then based on the response from all our customers, the first connector we're coming out with that really provides this closed loop allows us to directly integrate with the ticketing systems of these tools is ServiceNow, and we're looking at others like BMC, et cetera, for next year. But we're working with ServiceNow's leading integration partner, Fruition, to help us develop this integration, and this is going to provide an ongoing continuous improvement directly between ServiceNow and Blazent. So as you log into ServiceNow, you can look at the quality exceptions that we've shown, go directly back and forth between Blazent through single sign-on, and really close the loop for continuously improving this data quality. So those are something that we'll keep everybody posted on. I know several people have already signed up for updates on the ServiceNow connector, and we'll probably have future webinars on the data quality module on the ServiceNow connector. So that's what I wanted to cover for some of the exciting things that are coming soon. And then I wanted to turn it now back over to Raleigh for the question and answer portion and wrap up.
Great, thank you, Adam. Before I jump into the Q&A, I did want to point out some additional resources. You can contact Blazent for a solution demo. I've provided the phone number and the email, and this information will also be included in the follow-up email. Also, I encourage you to check out the EMA blog site as well. Before I jump into speaker questions, I know a lot of people wanted to know if they would be receiving the speaker slides, and yes, that will be part of the follow-up email, and that will be coming out later this week. So let's go ahead and jump right into the questions. Bernie, this first one came in for you. This individual wanted to know, we just created a new data governance function within our company. What's the best approach to get started with the capabilities Blazent offers?
Okay. Well, it depends on the definition of data governance structure. Multiple companies got different definitions. But, I mean, the way we look at least historically, I've been involved in looking at data governance is, one, you got to identify what the endpoint needs to look like. You need to identify, are you going to have a single source of truth? If you're going to have a single source of truth, then you need to identify, if that's the endpoint, what do you need, let's just say from a financial, a business, and an operations or IT perspective as far as the data components, and then you kind of go backwards into the environment. You take a look at if the environment is you're setting up in the future a replacement for existing technology, or if it's just a consolidation of the data components, or what's the main feeds of the data components to make the source of truth, and it helps you make a lot of the key decisions. But what you basically do is you identify how you're moving forward, and with Blazent, with all those identifications of those current sources of data, you would create like what Adam showed here on a couple of the charts before the end here, where how they actually do the reconciliation of it to create the gold record. The gold record would then become your source of truth, and you would use it to either to feed into your replacement systems, your future systems, or your other capabilities.
Great, thank you for that explanation, Bernie. Adam, there were a couple of questions that came in regarding the Blazent solution that I will address to you. The first is, this individual wanted to know, can we compare 2 months' data in Blazent?
Yeah, if I think I understand the question. What we normally do is, if there's multiple sources of information, we have been used in the past to compare. I'm not sure if, I'd have to get in a little bit more detail to see if they're requesting whether or not we keep track of all the deltas. But our goal is to really, on an ongoing basis, what we normally do is, most of our customers are doing it on a weekly basis. We have some that are doing it daily. But we're pulling in from all these different sources, the electronic tools and the main source, on an ongoing basis. We're pulling the data extracts from these systems. We're doing the reconciliation and then presenting the data so that they can take action on it. And normally they're correcting the information over that week. Then the next synchronization process happens, and that data is pulling it again. So it's really a continuous improvement process. It's not typically looking at just 1 month versus another, but it is something depending on what systems they're referring to that we could do.
Great, thank you. And another question that came, Adam, is, can you give some examples of how, after issues are discovered with the golden record, what type of recommendations are made to ensure the user community doesn't end up in the same place down the road?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. It's something that we've built in as part of the product. One of the things that we do, and probably would be best shown through a demonstration, but as we see exceptions that are found, whether that's devices that aren't making their way into the CMDB, things that aren't being disposed of properly, tools that aren't being deployed, we group those exceptions that we find from a root cause perspective. So are they all occurring in the same location? Is there a particular department that we're having the biggest issues with? Is it all occurring in the same platform team, and maybe that platform team isn't utilizing best practice or process? So one of the things we do focus on is how do we group these things in a meaningful way so that when you need to take action on the data, you can figure out not just solving the data issue, but also what the process gap was that created the issue. And that way, over time, as you fix both the data and the process, you can continuously improve and eliminate a lot of those problems so you're not seeing them over and over and over again. So that's something that we do see and we've built into the product to help deal with that exact situation.
Great, thank you. Now let's jump over to you, Charlie. How do you actually measure data quality?
Well, it's always specific to the data, but the first thing is you have to define what good looks like, and it has to be, specifically that, for example, the serial numbers in the fixed asset system will match serial numbers in the IT asset system, because many organizations have a separate fixed asset system, often part of the ERP system, as opposed to the IT asset system, which we often see coupled with the overall IT service management suite. So you might say, well, obviously, if I've got servers in both places, because servers are capital assets, and many or a subset or all of them are going to be in the fixed asset system. If I can't reconcile these two systems, that's a bad thing. And a good thing is if they're 100% reconciled. Now, 100% reconciliation, in my experience, is very difficult. But you would say, okay, well, we're going to take a baseline, and right now it's at 85%, and now we're going to trend it over time, and we're going to look at those root cause issues, as Adam has said, and say, okay, is it with particular vendors? Is it with particular organizations, business units that don't seem to be getting that end-to-end flow across the fixed asset and IT asset system? Is there the possibility of using EDI techniques? Can we get the serial numbers electronically from the vendor? And what does it take to do that? Do we need to send them a pre-reserved block of serial numbers from our IT asset system? And that's often a kind of a final response as people go down this road of serial number integrity. But it also depends, if that's the problem you're trying to solve. But if you're trying to solve a problem of reconciling across a line of business application portfolio versus an enterprise application portfolio, that's a different set of issues. And if you're concerned about completeness of data, that okay, we've got the server record, but we don't always know the support group, and 80% of the servers, we've got the support group of 20% we don't. So you define it in a quantitative way. And you measure it and you track it and trend it over time, and then you show that trending to the people out there, who might otherwise be disinclined to use the shared data resource and go off and build their own thing.
Yeah. Just if I could interject as well, Charlie, I think that was good. I think it also, in relationship to the other question about comparing one month's data to another, I think it's similar to that as well. As you mentioned, the trending, that's one of the things that we look at is, as we set the baseline initially of where you're at from a data quality perspective, an accuracy perspective for what percentage you can verify, we're tracking that over time so that you can see from month to month or even year to year whether or not that's improving and where you've come from and going to.
Yeah, and that's so important, because just like availability, you never get to perfect data quality. What you have to show is that you're approaching perfection. People who insist say we just got to be right. Well, I mean, there's no data set out there where even the largest customer data sets, it's always accepted that there's going to be some inaccuracies. You measure and improve. One of the things I really liked about the first question was the implication that enterprise data governance should be concerned about IT management data. I think that's absolutely an innovative approach, getting the enterprise data governance board in the loop on the IT data, because otherwise enterprise data governance may just go off and work on customer data, which is important and maybe should be 70% of their priority. But they should be devoting some bandwidth to the IT data, because it's a gnarly problem. There's a lot of impacts to incorrect IT data.
Great. Thank you, Charlie and Adam. And that brings us to the top of the hour. I did want to thank everyone for joining us today. You will be receiving a follow-up email later this week, which will include the on-demand playback of today's event, as well as a PDF of the speaker slides. I know there were some individuals who asked questions that we were not able to get to. I will send those on to the speakers, and someone will follow up with you. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.